Once upon a time, in a small dusty village where the wind carried both dreams and despair, there lived a young widow named Jamila. Her husband had died in a factory accident, leaving her alone with 2 little children and an empty home. People whispered behind her back, "She won't survive long." But every morning, Jamila stood by her door, looked at the rising sun, and whispered to herself, "Today will be better. I must not give up." There was often no food in the house. Her children cried from hunger, and her heart broke each time she looked into their eyes. Neighbors pitied her, but pity never filled an empty stomach. So one evening, Jamila boiled plain water and told her children, "We're making magic soup today. It will fill your bellies with strength." The children smiled. Jamila smiled too through tears. That smile wasn't made of happiness. It was made of hope. Every morning, she went to work in other people's fields under the burning sun. Her hands grew rough, her skin darkened, but her spirit never dimmed. Each evening she returned home, exhausted yet full of love, whispering to her children, "We're one step closer to a better life." People asked her, "Jamila, how do you keep smiling?" She always answered, "If I lose hope, I will lose everything." One afternoon, Jamila sat beneath an old tree near the village mosque. She was weary, her back ached, her hands trembled. An elderly man came and sat beside her. He looked at her kindly and said, "You look like someone who carries a mountain on her back." Jamila smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, "but I believe one day I'll reach the top." The man nodded. He was a social worker from the city. A week later he returned with opportunity. He helped Jamila find work at a women's center, and her children were given free schooling. Slowly life began to change. Jamila learned new skills, started sewing clothes, and soon began teaching other village women. Her home filled with laughter, her heart with peace. Years passed, and the same people who once pitied her now said, "Jamila is not just a widow. She is a symbol of strength." At a village celebration, someone asked her, "What gave you the strength to rise again?" Jamila looked at the crowd, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "When I had nothing," she said, "I still had one thing, hope. I told myself every day that things would change, and slowly they did. Life doesn't always give us what we want, but if we hold on to hope and think positively, we create our own path. A positive mind may not solve every problem, but it gives us the courage to face them all." If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe to Tales with English. Let's keep learning, growing, and believing together. Jamila's dream. Years passed, and Jamila's name became known far beyond her little village. The women's center where she once learned sewing had turned into a small workshop. Jamila's Hands of Hope. It wasn't just a workplace. It was a home for women who had lost faith in themselves. Every morning the sound of sewing machines filled the air, steady, rhythmic, like the beating of hopeful hearts. Young girls came to learn from Jamila, not only stitching fabric, but also stitching back the torn pieces of their confidence. One day, a girl named Aisha came to her door. She was thin, frightened, and silent. Her father had fallen ill, and she wanted to earn money but didn't know how. Jamila looked at her and saw her own reflection from years ago. "Come, child," Jamila said softly. "You don't need to know how yet. You just need to believe you can learn." Weeks turned into months. Aisha became one of the best seamstresses. One afternoon she said to Jamila, "Teacher, when I came here I had nothing. Now I can dream again." Jamila smiled and replied, "Dreams grow where hope is planted." As her small workshop flourished, a city journalist came to interview Jamila. Cameras flashed, and for the first time Jamila's story appeared in the newspaper. Donations poured in. Soon, the women's center expanded into a training school for poor women across nearby villages. Jamila stood outside one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky gold. Her children, now young adults, stood beside her. One was a teacher, the other a nurse. The wind carried laughter from the schoolyard. Her son said, "Mother, you built something greater than a home. You built hope." Jamila looked up at the glowing horizon and whispered, "Hope built me first." Moral: sometimes the smallest spark of hope can light up the darkest paths. Not just for one person but for many. The storm and the seed. For many years, Jamila's Hands of Hope flourished. Women came from faraway villages to learn skills. earn a living and find purpose. Jamila's school became a symbol of change, a place where tears turned into strength. But life, as Jamila often said, never moves in a straight line. One summer, a terrible drought hit the region. The crops dried up, wells turned to dust, and hunger returned to the village. Many families left in search of work. Donations to the center stopped. The sewing machines went silent. One evening, Jamila sat alone in the empty classroom. The walls that once echoed with laughter now held only silence. She felt a pain she hadn't felt in years, the fear of losing everything again. She looked at her trembling hands and whispered, "Maybe this is where it ends." Just then Aisha, the same girl Jamila had once helped, walked in carrying a pot of water and a small plant. "Teacher," she said gently, "the ground is dry, but I found this by the river. I thought we could plant it here." Jamila looked at the tiny green stem. Fragile but alive. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. "Yes, Aisha," she said. "We'll plant it. Hope must live somewhere." The next day, Jamila called the few women who were still in the village. "We may not have money," she said, "but we have hands. Let's use them." They began sewing cloth bags, scarves, and handmade toys using old materials. Jamila sent a few pieces to a friend in the city, and to everyone's surprise, people loved them. Orders started coming in. The drought hadn't ended, but hope had returned. Months later, rain finally blessed the land again. The little plant Aisha had brought grew into a tree, standing proudly in front of the center, its leaves shining like promises kept. That evening, as Jamila stood beneath the tree, her daughter asked, "Mother, how do you stay strong even when the world seems to fall apart?" Jamila looked at the sky and said, "Because storms don't destroy the seed of hope, they water it." Moral: when life dries your world, don't curse the sun. Plant your seed of hope. One day it will grow into shade for others. The legacy of light. Years passed, and the little tree in front of Jamila's hands of hope grew tall and strong. Its branches stretched toward the sky, casting cool shade over the courtyard where laughter once again filled the air. Jamila had grown older. Her hair, once black as night, now shimmered like silver threads under the sun. Yet her eyes still carried the same spark, the fire of a woman who had walked through darkness and found her way by faith. Her children had built good lives. Her son Rahim worked as a teacher in a nearby town, spreading her lessons of kindness and courage. Her daughter Sana ran a small health clinic beside the center. And Aisha, once the shy girl who could barely speak, had become the new head of the women's center. One morning reporters came again. This time not just from the city but from the capital. They wanted to make a documentary about Jamila's life. As the cameras rolled, one journalist asked, "Jamila, what message would you give to the women of the world?" Jamila smiled gently and said, "Tell them, you may be poor but you are not powerless. You may be broken but you are not finished. Every woman carries light. She just needs to believe it can shine." That evening, the whole village gathered under the tree. There were songs, laughter, and stories about the old days, the hard times, the drought, the magic soup, and the hope that never died. Jamila sat quietly, watching the faces of women she had once taught, now confident, proud, and independent. Tears filled her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. She looked at the tree and whispered, "I planted hope in the hearts of others, and now it blooms everywhere." As the night sky filled with stars, Jamila closed her eyes, feeling peace like she had never known. The next morning, the village woke to find her gone, her face calm, a gentle smile resting on her lips. Under the big tree, the women placed a small wooden sign. It read, "Herb, here rests Jamila, the woman who taught us to hope." Herb. And every year on the day of her passing, the women and children of the village gather under that same tree to share stories, food, and laughter. They call it the Festival of Hope. Moral: hope is not something we keep, it's something we pass on. When one person believes, an entire world can change. The seeds of tomorrow. Many years passed since Jamila's peaceful departure. Her tree had grown even taller now, its roots deep in the soil, its branches heavy with shade and songbirds. Beneath it stood a new building painted bright white and blue. The sign at the gate read, "Cherry Blossom Jamila Foundation for Women by Women." Cherry Blossom. The foundation had been started by Aisha, Jamila's most devoted student, and Sana her daughter. What once began as a small sewing center in a dusty village had become a movement that reached across the country. Women from distant towns came to learn tailoring, farming, reading, and business skills. Many who had once lost hope found their purpose again. They would often look at Jamila's old photograph hanging in the main hall, her gentle smile forever reminding them, "If you have hope, you have everything." One day, Sana was invited to speak at a large women's conference in the city. It was her first time standing before a crowd of hundreds. Her voice trembled at first, but then she remembered her mother's calm strength and began, "My mother Jamila taught me that real wealth is not money, it's courage. She had nothing but a dream, and she used it to build a future for us all. Today we continue her dream, to help every woman believe that she can rise." The audience stood and clapped for a long time. Many had tears in their eyes. Later that night, as Sana returned to her village, she stopped by her mother's tree. The moonlight fell softly on the leaves. She placed her hand on the trunk and whispered, "Mother, your light still guides us. Your hope still breathes in every heart you touched." A gentle wind blew through the branches, as if the tree itself was answering her. From that day onward, the Jamila Foundation began spreading centers to more villages, each one planted like a seed of hope. And wherever a new center opened, a young tree was planted in Jamila's memory. The people said, "Wherever her trees grow, hope will never die."